I think very often people say that knowing yourself is the most important thing, right? And when I say knowing yourself, I'm not talking about the mystical or the metaphysical way of knowing yourself, right? When I say knowing yourself in this context, I really mean who you are or how you show up to the world on the day-to-day basis, right? And when I look around me, I see a lot of people who do know themselves to a large extent. They know the type of job, the type of career, the type of passion that they actually want to pursue in life. They know the type of relationship that they actually want, or they know the type of life or the life that they ultimately want to live, right? But even though they do know themselves, they fail miserably to be themselves. And when I really think about it, knowing yourself is really conceptual, right? Knowing yourself is truly just in the mind. But being yourself is to be the greatest expression of yourself in every given moment, in any given circumstance in your life, right? And I think a lot of us are so afraid of actually being ourselves because we believe that, maybe who we are naturally isn't good enough to give us the life that we want. Or we believe that the moment we actually be ourselves, then ultimately we will lose a lot of people from our lives. And if being yourself causes you to lose a lot of people, then they weren't meant to be in your life in the first place, right? Or a lot of us, in a sense, we're so afraid of being ourselves because we fear how we're going to be perceived by the world. And I really believe that, and I've always said this, it's not how you look to the outside world, but ultimately how you feel in the world within. If the entire world praises you, right? If the entire world validates you, but if it's not on the premise of you actually being yourself, then there's truly no point at all. All that praise, all that, I guess, validation is truly meaningless if it's not truly in accordance with the authentic you. Alright? And I think a life that is well lived, a life that is meaningful, is ultimately when we're in alignment with ourselves. Is ultimately when we're our greatest expression of ourselves in any given moment, right? To truly live life is to live life on your terms, regardless of the perceived consequences, regardless of how the world is going to see you, regardless of how you think others are going to judge you, right? And this is probably gonna be kind of controversial to a lot of people, but I really believe that you don't even truly have to know yourself to actually be yourself, right? If you really think about a flower doesn't have any concept of itself, it just is, right? It blooms, right? If you think about a dog has no concept of itself, it just is. Or if you even think about a child has very little concept of his or herself, but he or she just is, right? And this is not to say you live like a child or you live like a dog or a flower. What I'm saying is that we don't always have to constantly judge ourselves. We don't always have to constantly sort of watch ourselves, right? And I think in our constant, I guess, thinking of ourselves, we cause ourselves to sort of be self-conscious in a lot of ways. In our constant thinking of ourselves, we judge ourselves and we dim ourselves down, or we dumb ourselves down in a lot of ways, right? And I think if we just allow ourselves to be intimate with ourselves, if we just allow ourselves to be intimate in any moment of life or as much as we can, right? Then ultimately our true self will shine through, right? I've always said that, love blossoms through presence. And I think in the same way, our authentic self blossoms with our ability to be present with life as well, right? Like for example, whenever I'm doing something that I really love to do, right? Whenever I'm doing something that is where my heart is, right? Let's say I'm making these videos, for example. Naturally, I'm not really thinking about myself. I'm just being present with whatever it is that I'm doing. I'm just immersing myself in the moment and being present with myself in the moment, right? And in that moment, whatever thoughts pop up into my head, or whatever comes through, my natural personality, it shines through. But whenever I make videos and I'm sort of thinking how my voice sounds, or thinking about how people are gonna sort of think about what I say, and I'm just always in this constant judgment and watching of myself, I realize that I sort of dim my light down a bit. I dim my authentic self down a bit to a large extent, right? But whenever I'm just present, whenever I'm just being, I'm being in my beingness, right? I'm just being intimate with myself and whatever it is that I'm doing that gives me life. That's when I truly begin to shine. That's when I truly begin to express myself, and my authentic self finds a way to truly express itself. And I think we can show up to life in that same way. We can show up to life, and in most situations our true selves can be, I guess, shined, or our true selves can come out if we're just being present, if we're just truly being in the moment, right? And I really think it's important for us to find things that we truly love to do. Surround ourselves with people that we really love to be around, right? Because when we're surrounded by people that we actually like to be around, or we're doing things that we actually love to do, then we're not truly judging and sort of dwelling in this place of self-consciousness, right? We're just being, right? We're just being in the moment, doing what we love, and surrounding ourselves with people who we don't even have to sort of constantly think about ourselves, right? And the best relationships that I've found are people who just aren't afraid of dropping the mask, aren't afraid of their weird side or the side that a lot of people might not like coming out, and they're just expressing themselves. And I think ultimately, those relationships are sort of rare these days. Ultimately, because a lot of people, they sort of look at someone else and they sort of are always thinking in their minds how they're going to be perceived to that person, then ultimately no one is truly being themselves. Everyone is going to the world and everyone is truly just wearing a mask, and no one is actually, I guess, walking in their authenticity. No one is actually walking in their light, right? Because they're always thinking about how they're going to be perceived. But when you naturally just drop that need to be a certain way, or drop that need to be perceived a certain way, and you're not over concerned about how you're going to look in the moment, and you're just being, that's when the real you shines through, right? And don't get me wrong, it's kind of hard when the world teaches you at a young age that, our natural self isn't good enough. But I've always said that you have to love yourself so much for the entire world to hate you. And when I say you have to love yourself so much for the entire world to hate you, I'm not talking about just being a complete asshole to people, or sort of, doing messed up shit to people, right? When I say love yourself so much for the world to hate you, what I mean is that you have to love the real you, the authentic you, so much that it doesn't matter how this person is perceiving you. It doesn't matter if this person likes you. It doesn't matter if, people accept you at all, right? When you're being your true self, when you're showing up as your true self, when you ultimately love the real you, then ultimately the concern that you have about being accepted is no longer present, because you accept you. And that truly is the most important thing. If you go to the world and you don't really accept you, it doesn't matter who accepts you. You're always going to sort of feel that emptiness and that hollowness inside. But if the entire world accepts you and you don't accept you, it's truly meaningless. And if you accept you and the entire world doesn't accept you, then ultimately you're still at peace because you're at peace with yourself. And that is the most important thing. But I think knowing yourself is meaningless if you don't actually allow yourself to be. Knowing yourself is sort of meaningless if you're not showing up to the world as the real you. And I think it's important for us to transcend even knowing. It's important for us to transcend knowing and allow ourselves to be in a state of being. Because I believe that in the state of beingness, in presence, that's when we truly blossom. That's when the light within us shines through the most. Right? When we're allowing ourselves to be intimate with every moment in life, or as much as possible, right? And we surround ourselves with people who we don't have to actually wear a mask around. Then we have the luxury of actually being ourselves. But if we're always thinking about how we're going to look to the world, how we're going to look to this person, how we're being in the moment, and we keep judging ourselves, then ultimately the experience that we experience in life is not going to be the best. And I think life becomes much more beautiful when we just allow ourselves to shine through. When we allow ourselves to express even the most intimate parts of ourselves without fear of how we're going to be perceived, or without fear of whether or not, we're going to fail or, succeed or this or that. And we just allow ourselves to be intimate in any moment. That's when life truly becomes beautiful. But if we're living and we're always judging ourselves, we're always thinking about how we're going to be perceived, or we're dimming our lights down just to be accepted, validated, and liked, then ultimately we're not living a life that is meaningful. Ultimately, we're not living a life that is truly worth living, as harsh as that sounds, right? If you're showing up to the world and you're not being the real you, then you're not truly living at all. A life that is worth lived and a life that is well lived is a life in which you're your true and most authentic self, regardless of the fear of how you're going to be perceived, regardless of any perceived fear you have. If you're being yourself, that's truly the most important thing. And so I say all this to say, right? Knowing yourself is important, right? Knowing certain parts of yourself, self-observation has its place in life, right? It truly does. But we don't always have to sort of observe ourselves. I think it's important for us to just allow ourselves to be. I think it's important for us to just allow our true selves to be expressed by being intimate in any given moment. And if we allow ourselves to be intimate, that's when life truly does become beautiful. And that's when we truly begin to blossom. And so there's no point in really knowing yourself if you're not going to be yourself. There's truly no point in knowing yourself if you're not going to sort of allow the greatest expression of yourself to shine through. And so it's really important for us to show up to the world as we are, without the mask, without the facade, without the fears, and really just allow ourselves to be. And in allowing ourselves to be, that's when the light that is within us truly does begin to shine through, right? And that's when life truly does become beautiful. So, yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being here with me. And like I said, knowing yourself is important. Self-observation is very important. But we don't always have to sort of observe or watch ourselves. I think it's important for us to go beyond the confines of the mind and really just allow ourselves to be. And with allowing ourselves to be, then who we are naturally shines through. And we ultimately allow who we truly are at our core to be expressed to the world. So yeah, take care of yourselves, give yourselves a little bit of love every day, like I always say. And I will see y'all in the next one. Peace and blessings.